the object of my knowledge. In other words, thing in itself and the known thing that I know. Similarly, there is a distinction between the supreme subject, that is pure consciousness, and the subject who is engaged in the process of epistemological mechanism. So the pure object and pure subject, or the thing in itself and the subject in itself, they are metaphysical issues. Immanuel Kant is silent about it. He is not silent, he is critical about it. Buddha was silent about it, but Immanuel Kant is very much critical about it. Immanuel Kant is speaking about not speaking about the transcendent subject, the transcendent object. Rather, Immanuel Kant is giving importance upon the transcendental object and transcendental subject. This is the difference between transcendent and transcendental. The object of knowledge is a transcendental object. Object in itself, thing in itself, that is transcendent. Transcendent means our knowledge can't reach there. We don't have any access to know it. Therefore it transcends. But without the presence of a subjectivity, no synthesis is possible. So that subject which synthesizes the discrete perceptions and which forms the judgments, that is the transcendental subject or epistemological subject or the logical subject. That is not the transcendent subject, as Vedanta says, Atman. This is the difference between phenomena and noumena. Noumena belongs to the transcendent. Phenomena belongs to the transcendental. Transcendental means which is a priori. A priori means which is independent of experience. Transcendental means independent of experience and universal. Now the point is, how can space and time or any category or any mechanism will become transcendental when we depend upon experience, when knowledge begins from experience? If knowledge begins from experience, that we admit in the philosophy of Immanuel Kant, that knowledge begins from experience. If knowledge begins from experience, then how can we say that it is transcendental? Though here the question, the answer is, even if we are discussing about experience, we have to deal with some forms, some conditions which are not experienced. That means experience, we require some elements which are not experienced. That means we have to experience something through certain forms which are beyond experience. Therefore, it is transcendental. Experience is factual. For experience, we need a factual world, empirical world, the objective world. But how can we say that our perception is transcendental, our understanding is transcendental, transcendental aesthetic, transcendental analytic, transcendental deduction, transcendental illusion? How? Transcendental synthetic apprehension and intuition, transcendental reproduction of reproduction in imagination, transcendental recognition in a concept. Everything is transcendental in Immanuel Kant. Why? And Immanuel Kant also says that knowledge begins from experience. For experience, we need the practical world, the empirical world. Here comes the role of the mind. Because mind is very much active. Mind is not a passive agent of a epistemological mechanism. Mind is very much active. Without the interference of mind, without the preconditioning formats of mind, no perception is possible, no understanding is possible. Therefore, we can't ignore the contribution of mind. By that, the autonomy of sensation is rejected. So this is a claim against David Hume and all implicit philosophers, because they claimed that empiricism is the only source of knowledge. There is no role of mind. Immanuel Kant says, no, it's impossible. Whatever we perceive, forget about understanding, forget about conceptualization. For conceptualization, mind is necessary. But even in perception, mind is very much required. Without the interference of mind, without the a priori percepts of mind, that is space and time, we cannot have any perception. Perception of the empirical world is possible through the percepts of space and time. These percepts are logical percepts because these two, space and time, are not experienced through our experience. We can't experience space and time. But without space and time, nothing can be experienced. So, our perception is always spaced and timed. It is spatio-temporally conditioned. So, because of these two a priori mental conditions, which is free from experience, which is independent of experience, Immanuel Kant says that our perception is also transcendental perception. So there is a difference between empirical perception and transcendental perception. To some extent, Naya system has also said that without the interference of mind, simply the connection between object and sense organ, we can't have any perception. Mind has an active role in knowledge situation. Therefore, it is transcendental. So, perception is through the a priori formats of space and time. By this, we collected the data from the empirical world. From somewhere, not the empirical world, from somewhere. And that we claim that the object of knowledge. That is not the object as it is. Object as such. That is the object of our knowledge. We don't know the character of anybody. When we give the certificate, character certificate, we simply say, to the best of my knowledge. To the best of my knowledge, Mr. Das is so and so. I know him since 10 years, and to the best of my knowledge, he is so and so. Similarly, I don't know the real objects. To the best format of my knowledge, I just claim that this is the object of my knowledge. You claim this is the object of your knowledge. Nobody has seen, nobody can claim the object by its own nature. Exactly the same thing is said in Jaina system. Anekantavada is there because a single vada, a single view is impossible. We can't give a definite view. We can't give a final conclusion about the character of an object or anything else. And whenever we give a judgment, that is through our mental conditions. Perception is conditioned and understanding is also conditioned. So, the first scrutiny, this first format is that, and that is very, very important. Many times we think that the transcendental aesthetic is very simple. Space and time is very simple. Oh, it is very simple to say that that whenever we perceive something, we perceive through space and time. So that matter overs there. No. That is very, very important. Why it is important? Because here Kant made a clear-cut distinction between science and metaphysics, between physics and metaphysics. Even in physics, the real physical world and the apparent physical world. Because whatever is not perceived through space and time, that belongs to metaphysics. So in the first door, there is a demarcation, there is a distinction, there is a separation from the reality and appearance, truth and appearance, object and object of knowledge. This is very, very important. So this is the seed of criticism. Criticism starts from here. That there is no scope for metaphysics because that has been eliminated by this process. Whatever we are speaking about, that must come in these two empirical conditionings, because the perception is empirical and that is space and time. Here we are separate, we are distinct from the real world. So Immanuel Kant's philosophy is basically the philosophy of epistemology. He has given much importance upon epistemology because epistemology is the root of all crises. That is the root of all metaphysical problems. If epistemology is clearly understood, then metaphysics can be clearly explained. So whatever we perceived through space and time, they are supplied for judgment. They will constitute our future knowledge. Knowledge is not formed. Knowledge will be constituted by the collected data. So knowledge is the future. The collection of data is the present. So the future knowledge, that is judgment, that is understanding, that depends upon our format of perception. Whatever we perceived through space and time that can only be supplied for understanding. Therefore, Immanuel Kant said, understanding makes nature. Here nature is also transcendental nature. Here nature is not Rita. Here nature is not the cosmos. There is always a distinction. Suppose we are speaking about God, whether it is a transcendental God or the real God. When we are talking about subjects, whether it's the transcendental subject or the transcendent subject. Similarly, whether the object is the real object or is the object of knowledge or the transcendental object. So understanding makes nature means the nature that is our epistemological nature. That means the nature that is through our knowing mechanism, through our epistemology. Understanding makes nature means understanding makes the nature of our understanding. Understanding makes our understood nature. The nature that is understood, not the real nature, because the real nature cannot be made by any understanding. So we understand only the understood nature. So everything belongs to a human format. This is the contribution of Immanuel Kant. Our entire interpretation about anything, whether we speak in science, we speak in theology, in every discipline, whatever we speak through a human format. And we take that as absolute. We take that as final. We take that as granted. That is the real problem in philosophy. Therefore, Immanuel Kant is called the critical philosopher. He is very much critical about it because he is closing the doors of metaphysics, speculated metaphysics, imaginary metaphysics. Man is free to speculate, there is no problem, but don't include your speculation in philosophy. You give a very beautiful name that is my speculation, that is my imagination. You don't say that this is philosophy. Nobody's speculation, nobody's imagination can't be called a rational philosophy, a critical philosophy. Therefore, we have to be very much aware of the limit of epistemology, limit of knowledge. So in transcendental deduction, he is very much scientific about the process of knowing, how the concepts are conceptualized through the categories of understanding. And it appears to be very common sense. I think it is not a great philosophy. If we shall minutely observe the process of our knowing, we can understand it. We should not go through the textbook. We should not go through the mind of Immanuel Kant. It is common sense. Whenever we perceive something, we have to keep in mind. We have to keep in mind that we have to perceive the whole, the totality. The totality. This is the first condition of transcendental deduction, that in the course of a perception, we have to perceive the totality, the entire canvas, the entire thing. Suppose I am perceiving a person, my friend. I don't perceive him half or 1/4. I perceive his whole body. Even I perceive, I remember, forget remember, if I perceive his entire body. If I forget his face and I just remember, I just perceive his other parts of his body, then I can't be able to synthesize. So for synthesis, my perception should be complete. And that should be recorded in my intuition. And I am the owner of my perception. I can't keep that in bank. I can't keep that in others' memory. I have to remember that. I have to keep that in my intuition. Intuitively, I should perceive the entire thing, the whole thing. Suppose I am driving, I have to perceive the road scene totally, not half. If there is a half perception, there will be accident. My awareness should be complete. Suppose I am cooking, I have to visualize the entire scene. Otherwise, I can't do that. So in perception, our perception should be complete, that's total. But the second point is that we should remember the part perceptions. The part perceptions should be remembered. X1, X2, X3, X4. Suppose X1 is perceived, then X2, X3. Suppose I am in the at the point of X10, I have forgotten X1 or 2, then there will be no judgment. It is quite impossible. अरे बेल बाजूची तळे. So reproduction in imagination. Reproduction means whatever is already produced in X1 perception, in X2 perception, that will be reproduced in my imagination. Imagination means the past, what has lost. What has lost means what has passed, the previous. That should be reproduced in my imagination. That means in a fraction of a moment, when I am perceiving the totality, I have perceived each and every part of that. In the Naya system, it is called Nirvikalpa, then Sabhikalpa. In the Nirvikalpa state, that is Nirguna, that is no attribute. I am perceiving something. But in that Nirguna, there is a gradual perception of each and every step. Thereby, I become able to describe with attributes. So that Nirguna or Nirvikalpa is not Niskriya. That is not inactive. That is Nirguna means, that is Nirvikalpa means, that is the first stage of perception. That is the first stage. Perception develops in this way. First I perceive something without any attribute, then gradually I reproduce the attributes in my imagination. And very quickly that takes place. Because we have many things to perceive. And perceptions go in series. So we don't stop somewhere to complete our perception. So this psychological process or logical process, they go very quickly, that operate very quickly. So three things are there. Number one, the perception of the totality. Number two, reproduction of the part perception in imagination. The totality should be perceived, otherwise judgment is impossible. Production of each perception is necessary, otherwise judgment is impossible. And the third one is, no synthesis is possible if there is not a transcendental consciousness, not the absolute consciousness, that I am perceiving. I am perceiving the totality. I am perceiving the parts. I am synthesizing the parts. I am reproducing the parts in my imagination. Everything is done by me. Me means I am the logical subject. I am the logical subject who is very much constant, who is continuing in all these series. So myself as a knower, as a transcendental knower, not the transcendent knower, Atman, Brahman, no, not in that way, must be present in knowledge mechanism. So three things. One is the total perception. Number two, the reproduction of each perception. Number three, the perceiver. The perceiver, the presence of the perceiver. If there is no perceiver, this cannot be perceived. But that perceiver is not a metaphysical entity. That perceiver is a logical entity, and that is a temporary self. That is not the permanent self. In every judgment, this temporary self works. And that varies from one judgment to another judgment. And the mood of that subjective, that temporary self varies, because every judgment is not equal. Every feeling is not equal. But in every situation, knowledge situation, we can't ignore the presence of the logical knower. That is called the recognition in concept. We are able to form a concept when we recognize a temporary self and a subject, transcendental subject, or an epistemological subject who is responsible for all types of synthesis. By this, we are able to produce knowledge or judgment, sensibility and understanding. This much we had discussed in the last session. Then what is left? Here we shall discuss that, okay, the insensibility, we collected the data through space and time. That's okay. And then we are able to synthesize the discrete data to form judgments through these three processes. That's okay. But beyond these sensibility and understanding, Immanuel Kant says that there is a transcendental consciousness. There is a transcendental consciousness that he is calling the transcendental synthetic unity of our perception. This is a very technical concept and very beautiful concept. Transcendental synthetic unity of our perception. Our perception means perception. Before that, when we are using our perception, that it means it is independent of a perception. Therefore, it is transcendental. There is a conscious element in us which is constantly there, who is making a coordination between sensibility and understanding. That means not only we reject the autonomy of sensation, but also Kant has rejected the autonomy of understanding. That means one can't understand without the help of sensibility, and one can't have sensibility, or it has no meaning at all, if it is not scrutinized through understanding. So, suppose we shall ignore sensibility and we shall become a true rationalist like Leibniz, and we shall claim that there is no necessity of any sensibility, only rational ideas are there, and out of like Hegel also, and from these national ideas, we can have all types of ideas in the dialectic method. Then Immanuel Kant does not agree to this point. That means sensibility cannot be ignored. So sensibility and understanding both are necessary for having knowledge. Knowledge means the so-called knowledge, not the knowledge of the reality, knowledge of this phenomenal world. So in every knowledge situation, there is a necessity of the process of sensibility and the process of understanding. But here Immanuel Kant is speaking that in case of both sensibility and understanding, there is a synthetic unity of perception, means there is a self-consciousness. There is a self-consciousness who is very much active in case of a perception and also in case of a understanding. Otherwise, we can't have a beautiful, wonderful, or rational synthesis. So in perception, there is an apperception element which is free from perception, which is free from any conditions. That is self-consciousness. But that is not that self-consciousness as we discuss in Upanishads or Vedanta. Here another question will come that I had discussed in the first part. Sensibility is understood, understanding is understood, but how can we have a relation between sensibility and understanding? For example, when we are having sensations, we are conditioned by space and time. That means without space and time, we can't have any perception. From this, it appears that the concepts of understanding, they are free from space and time. Because space and time can only condition the empirical perception. Because the role of space and time ended there. Further, there is no role of space and time, because through space and time, we got our sense data. After that, we are synthesizing the discrete data by applying the 12 categories of understanding. That means these 12 categories of understanding, they are free from the a priori conditions of sensibility. That means there is no relation between the a priori conditions of sensibility and a priori conditions of understanding. If so, then the autonomy of concepts or the autonomy of conceptualization will remain at the top, because they are free from the spatio-temporal conditions. So that may lead to transcendental illusion. Immanuel Kant is very much conscious about it. He is speaking that the time is such a factor, such an a priori factor, which not only regulating the mode of perception, that also regulates the concepts. That means the 12 categories of understanding or concepts of understanding or the rules of understanding, they may not be conditioned by space, but they are conditioned by time. That is called schematism. We shall discuss that. That part also belongs to Transcendental Analytic. There are two types of perception: external perception, internal perception. The role of space and time, the role of space and time is required in any case of perception because Immanuel Kant claims that without space and time, we can't have any type of experience. But between space and time is much wider and powerful than space because all possible perceptions are conditioned by time, but space is responsible only for the outer experience. So far as our feelings are concerned, we can't ignore the a priori condition of time. This much we understand. But here Immanuel Kant says, not only the feelings, not only the internal perception, our conceptualization is also timed. Timed means it is conditioned by time. That means human rational conceptualization is conditioned by time factor. That means it is schematized. That means human thoughts are schematized, perceptions are schematized, and thoughts are also schematized. That means we are always through a scheme. If our conceptualization is free from time, it may be free from space, there is no doubt. But if it is free from time, then our conceptualization will have wings to fly. But that is not possible according to Kant. Therefore, Kant is saying that if you study the 12 categories of understanding, each category is conditioned by time. That is schematized by time. I mean, all the categories of understanding, they are schematized. How? That we shall discuss. There are 4 types: quantity, quality, relation, and modality. So in quantity, Immanuel Kant is speaking about 3. One is singularity, particularity, and universality. Immanuel Kant will now explain how these 3 categories of understanding are conditioned by time. Time means which are a priori conditions of sensibility. And what is the common sense? The a priori conditions of sensibility has no role in our conceptualization. This is common sense. But Immanuel Kant is saying that time is such a scheme that no epistemology is free from time factor. No thought is free from time factor. No conceptualization is free from time factor. So everything, every thought can be schematized by the time factor. So how? So about quantity, Immanuel Kant is speaking about time series. About quantity, Immanuel Kant is speaking about time series. About quality, Immanuel Kant is speaking about the presence of time. And about relation, Immanuel Kant is speaking about time order. And about modality, Immanuel Kant is speaking about the possibility of time. How? When we are discussing about quantity, there are 3 things: singularity, particularity, and universality. When we are talking about singularity as a category, we are talking about one moment of time. This is the explanation of Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant is schematizing the category of singularity with time. That when we are speaking about a single thing or object, here we say that this is one moment of time. Therefore, it is single. In mathematics also, it is there. Suppose I write 1. If again I shall write 1 on that 1, then it is not 2. If I shall take another space and another time and I shall write another 1, then it will be 1 plus 1 or 1 minus 1 or 1 into 1 or 1 divided by 1. There will be 2 ones. If 1 after 1, what I shall write 100 ones on 1, that is 1. So addition, subtraction, they are possible if the mathematical numbers are written in time sequence. Otherwise, it is therefore synthetic a priori knowledge is possible in mathematics. This is the empirical conditioning. Otherwise, mathematics cannot be possible. Similarly, when we are talking about singularity, Kant is speaking about one moment of time. When we are talking about particularity, that is the general moment of time. When we are talking about universality, that is the all moments of time. All moments of time. It is universal because it happens in all moments. It is particular because it happens in general moment. And it is singular because it happens in one moment. Similarly, in quality, there are 3. One is reality, negation, and limitation. Reality, negation, and limitation, these 3 categories belong to quality. This is the feeling of time. Feeling of time means when we see reality, this table is there, this is real. The table is there, it is reality. The table is not there, it is negation. So when I say the table is there, that means it is present in a time. It is present in a time. When we are speaking about negation, that is empty space. The empty time means it does not exist in any time. It does not exist in any time. And he is speaking about limitation, that is the absence of time. In this way, he is explaining the quality of reality, negation, and limitations, which are the categories of understanding. These categories of understanding are conditioned by time factor as time filled in, empty time, and absence of time. When we are speaking about reality, we think that it is filled in a time. It is filled up in a time. When we are talking about negation, it is empty time. And when we are talking about limitation, that is absence of time. Dr. Rao will explain that in better way when he will synopsize my talk. And that then comes the relation. Relation is time order. Relation is time order. In relation, he is talking about substance, causality, and reciprocal action. These 3 categories are there: substance, causality, and reciprocal action. So when we are talking about substance, that is permanent time. Substance means which cannot be the predicate. Substance means which cannot be predicated. That is the permanent time. When we are speaking about causality, that is follow-up in time. Follow-up in time means something happens in time 1, something happened in time 2. So this is the cause of that effect. At a time we can't have milk and curd. Milk at one time, curd in another time. So this is cause, that is effect, and they are cause and effect only because the sequence of time. That means follows in time. Something follows in time. And when we say reciprocal action, he is saying that it is appearing together in time. Appearing together in time. Action and reaction, when there is a relation between action and reaction, that means appearing together in time. I acted in a particular way at a particular time, and immediately I got the reaction. That means this action and reaction, they happened together. It is not that I reacted now and I shall get the reaction after 5 years. So action reaction is understood when both go together in time. So by this way, all these three categories of understanding can be schematized by time. And last one is modality, that is the sum total of time. That Immanuel Kant says that is the sum total of time. How? His possibility, actuality, and necessity. Possibility, actuality, and necessity. These three are the last categories of understanding. Possibility means exist at any time. That is possibility. Possibility means exist at any time. Actuality means existence in a definite time. That is actuality. Existence in a definite time. And necessity means at all times. At all times. 7 plus 5 is equal to 12. This is true in all times. Possibility means exist at any time. All time and any time. Any time refers to possibility. And actuality means this is now ice. But the position of ice, the status of ice, that is possible at a definite time. After sometimes it may become water or it may become vapor. So possibility, actuality, and necessity. So this is called schematism according to Immanuel Kant. He is trying to explain that everything is rooted through sensibility. That means everything can be schematized through time. So human understanding, human conceptualization is not time free. It is time specific. It is time centric. We cannot transcend time. Therefore, we have no scope for any speculation for metaphysics. If we do that, in spite of all these mechanisms, if we do that, if we misuse of our religion, if we give the free autonomy to our religion for any type of speculation about God, world, and self, then that is called a transcendental illusion that we shall discuss in Transcendental Dialectic in the next class, next session. So I thought that whatever we discussed today, that should be discussed in Transcendental Analytic, because this part is very important. Only for one thing that touched my heart and mind, that we had a general idea that sensibility and understanding, they are two independent mechanisms. But here Immanuel Kant is saying nothing is free from sensibility. Nothing is free from time factor. So it is the time, and that is the only scheme, in which everything has been schematized. So everything, every object of knowledge is schematized by time. So without sensibility, we can't imagine, we can't think of any understanding of nature or any epistemology. So sensibility is very much necessary for having judgment. And mere sensibility is nonsense without understanding. So both sensibility and understanding constitute our rational form of knowledge. I am speaking this much. So in the next session, we shall discuss Transcendental Dialectic. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Das, for the part 2 of the Transcendental Analytic, and taking the thread from where you have left in the last class, and also discussing that. You have very nicely tried to express as to what is transcendental unity of a perception. So you try to say that a perception is nothing but the consciousness, the unity of consciousness. When you say that when you are having a perception, the perception is something discrete, and these discrete perceptions are brought in by a unity, brought into a unity by the consciousness, and that consciousness is a perception, and that is not perception. So very nicely you have tried to say that, and as regarding the schematism of categories, well, I thought um, as space and time are a priori forms of intuition for all knowledge to be possible, and very nicely you have tried to show that this schematism is more or less it is in the temporal or the time-based schematism. And the entire schematism is in time. So somehow the space is left out here. So very nicely you have tried to show how the four different kinds of judgments that we have regarding quality, quantity, relation, and modality. How the quantity constitutes a sort of time series, and the quality implies a sort of you say the presence in time, presence of certain thing in time, and the relation as a temporal order wherein one follows the other. So again, then you talked of mortality, wherein you talked of the presence at all times, presence at the present time, and the presence, the possibility or impossibility of the presence of certain thing in time. So this is how you try to, well, I'm not synopsizing. Well, we have people, probably Srinivasan Krishnamurti sir has some questions in his mind. Well, I will also raise questions on the top. Well, Professor Srinivasan sir, you have something to say, probably. Well, yes.
Oh my God. Yes. Good evening to all. Hello. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, sir, audible, sir, audible.
Okay. See, the Kant's perception of various, conclusion of various factors like a priori perception, sensibility, and time and thoughts are conditioned by time. But I would like to know whether this same rule applies, for instance, if you consider the Eastern philosophy of Jagrada, Sushupti, and Swapna state of mind, where the thoughts are never conditioned by time. So the schematism of Kant, in my perception, I think it doesn't apply or it doesn't hold good there. Whereas the same thing, he speaks about the truth in reality. In the empirical world, it might be true. But even then, a human mind can just pass through 56,000 thoughts per day. Then how can this be conditioned by time is my question. Professor Das sir, could you please kindly clarify?
Thank you, Dr. Srinivasan ji. First you mute, sir. Mute yourself.
Oh, sorry.
Mute. Okay, thank you. You asked a very beautiful question, and this is a very common sense question also, because when we are discussing Immanuel Kant in a long series that we have already talked over 5 to 6 sessions on Immanuel Kant. So this is a very very pertinent question, and you are speaking about Einstein's perception. So this is the view of Immanuel Kant, that time is a factor and space is a factor. Without that, we can't have any perception. I am asking yourself, you speak of an example what you can think without time. This is my question to you. I am a very child. I'm a child. Being a child, I am asking a question that can you think anything without consuming any time? In your dream state, in your waking state, in your dreamless sleep state, in your meditation, in your spiritual practice, in which time you are time free? No time. Okay, this is one position. The second position, you spoke about Jagrata Sushupti and then there is a higher state that is called Turiya. We can compare the philosophy of Immanuel Kant with Advaita Vedanta, but there is a slight difference. Today's topic is exactly the Vedantic topic. I did not touch that because that will be injustice to Immanuel Kant. But there is a similarity. The similarity is that I shall speak the similarity, then the difference. The similarity is that what you said, that in all states of consciousness, in waking state, in dream state, and in dreamless sleep state, there is a common state that is Turiya. Turiya means the pure consciousness that is always present, like this. So this is the foundation, that is Turiya, that is pure consciousness, and different states of consciousness are recognized because there is a pure consciousness which is neither waking, nor dreaming, nor in the dreamless sleep state. So pure consciousness is the common flow through which we wake, we dream, and we go to the dreamless sleep stage. That consciousness is called pure consciousness, Atman in Advaita Vedanta. Similarly, Immanuel Kant says, whether you have a sensibility or understanding, whether you have all epistemological mechanisms in you, you have a transcendental self-consciousness which he is telling technically the transcendental synthetic unity of our perception. Our perception means which helps perception, but itself is not perceived. It is the witness of all epistemological mechanism. That self-consciousness is very much present in all types of epistemological mechanism, including both sensibility and understanding. This is another response to your another question, because the first question was whether there is anything time-free experience. No. The second question was whether there is a common point, common source, common energy through which our different levels of consciousness are operating. Yes, that is Turiya, that is pure consciousness. In the waking state, I am pure consciousness. In the dream state, I am pure consciousness. And in the dreamless sleep state, I am pure consciousness, but I can't identify myself as pure consciousness in the dream state, or in the waking state, or in the dreamless sleep state. Similarly, Immanuel Kant says, there is a transcendental synthetic unity of our perception in all types of epistemological mechanism. That we discussed today. But the difference, this is the similarity. The difference is that when Upanishads speak about the continuing flow of consciousness, they are talking about the objective consciousness. That is not the subjective consciousness. That is Satchidananda. That is Chit, not only Chit, that is Sat and Ananda. That is the entity, the higher entity, that is objectively real, that is the Paramasatya, that is the metaphysical truth. But when Immanuel Kant is speaking about synthetic unity of higher perception, he is talking about a logical consciousness. Without that logical consciousness, we can't synthesize the discrete percepts and separate concepts. This is my response.
Thank you, Professor Das. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor.
But one thing I would like to say here, that the self, if at all this idea of self, if at all we talk of consciousness, if at all the idea of self comes in, we don't have the self, the sort of self that we have in Vedanta. Well, for Kant, if at all he is talking of self, if at all, that would be a sort of logical self that we have to assume. Well, Professor Das, on this, please.
And it is not only Immanuel Kant, in Indian tradition also it is said by Gautam Buddha. He is also talking about consciousness without a permanent self. So consciousness is an epistemological mechanism. It is not objective, it is not ultimate truth. It is said by Gautam Buddha in Indian culture, and it is said by Immanuel Kant in the Western lands. That means subjectivity and objectivity both are necessary for having any knowledge situation. We can't avoid a subjective consciousness when we are having a judgment. So that is the logical consciousness according to Immanuel Kant. What was your question, Dr. Rao? Perhaps I.
No, you got, well, I got it, and you got it right, and well, I could.
That means consciousness is possible without self.
But somehow we have to assume a logical self, not the self.
Yes. Logical self, epistemological self.
Yes.
Epistemological self.
Yes, sir. Well, we have with us Anurima Bhattacharya. She wants to speak something. Welcome, Anurima, Dr. Anurima Bhattacharya. Welcome, Dr. Anurima.
Yeah. Good evening, sir. And it was indeed a pleasure and an honor to hear Dr. Das today, because it was an elaborate talk and so much enriching. So it was really a pleasure for me to hear to you. I have like two queries, if you can clarify that. How do you give an edge? How do you give an edge over to time rather than space in considering it as a form of sensibility? When we are considering space and time both as forms of sensibility, and you give an edge over to time than space. So please, I fail to understand that. So please, can you justify that? And secondly, when you're talking of subject and you're talking of a logical subject, and you said that this is a subject of knowledge. So how do you conceive this logical subject and subject of knowledge? Are they same or they are different? I mean, in which context exactly do you bring in the logical subject besides the subject of knowledge? Because initially you were distinguishing between subject and subject of knowledge, object and object of knowledge. So what Kant is bringing in context is the subject of knowledge, and the concept of logical subject and the subject of knowledge. Can you please relate these two? Okay, so this is the second.
Thank you. Okay. These two questions, or you have a third question?
No, only these two.
Thank you, madam. Regarding the first question about space and time is much wider than space, because whatever is not spaced, that can be timed. Suppose many things occur in space. Whatever occurs in space, that must occur in time. But whatever occurs in time may not occur in space. This is the difference. For example, suppose you have a feeling. How can you locate a space of that feeling? What is the address of that feeling? But that feeling must take in a time. So this is a very, very common difference between space and time. Okay. Therefore, I said, for internal perception, we may avoid space, but we can't avoid time. So time is the common a priori condition of both external and internal perception. Did you get my point about the first question? Suppose you have a feeling of a pleasure. You are pleased with me. Can you show that you are pleased with me in Puri or in Odisha or in Bombay or in America? You are pleased. You are pleased means you are pleased in a time. You can give a time reference to that. Okay. If you are giving a space reference, that is the reference of your total presence. That is not the reference of your feeling. So feelings or internal perceptions can occur in time. We cannot accommodate space for that. So time is wider than space. That means nothing is escaped through time. This is the first question. And the second question was the distinction between subject and the subject and subject of knowledge, and the difference between object and object of knowledge. Immanuel Kant.
No, sir. Sorry. I asked a question between the relation between the subject of knowledge and the logical subject.
They are same thing. Subject of knowledge means I mean knower. I mean the knower, and that knower is called Brahma or Brahmavid Brahmeva Bhavati in Advaita Vedanta. That knower himself is Brahman. But here Immanuel Kant says that knower is a logical knower. That knower is a human mind. This is the difference. Mind and the self. Here the subject of knowledge is the mind. Here the knower is the mind. It is not Brahman. It is not Atman. But in Vedanta, the knower himself is Brahman. Aham Brahmasmi. That means I know Brahma means I am Brahman. This is the difference. Number one. But I am explaining you in my way. The point is why there is such confusion. The confusion is there because we generally presuppose, as Dr. Rao was presupposing, and he is talking about the presupposition of all people. We generally presuppose, because we belong to Indian culture, we generally presuppose that we have consciousness means, we have thinking element means, there must have been a source, permanent consciousness, pure consciousness. But according to critical philosophers, this is an assumption. This is a metaphysical assumption. It is not logically warranted. So we should have to give logical foundation for our assumption. So if logically speaking, we must need an epistemological knower or epistemological witness or epistemological agent for having any knowledge. This much. So here also that there is I. There also there is I. But this I is called the epistemological knower. That I is called the absolute knower. Also, of course, in Upanishad also there is a distinction between Jiva and Atman. Jiva is the empirical knower. Jiva. But I am not going to that because it will be confusing. But it is very much clear the self that is engaged in epistemology, in the knowledge mechanism, that is the epistemological knower. It has no role with the permanent self. It is only engaged in a knowledge situation. And in another knowledge situation, this knowing self may remain absent because you are not the same person in all situations. When you are knowing something seriously in the science laboratory, that logical knower is something different. But when we are reading a romantic literature, a novel, there your knower is something different. Your feelings are different. Okay, but when we are discussing about Advaita Vedanta, in spite of all the differences, there is a state of Turiya, that is pure consciousness, that is Atman, and I am that, and all these modifications, the epistemological knower or psychological knower or my emotional knower, these are all modifications or mithya. They are not my real identity. But here Immanuel Kant is speaking, be very practical, be very sensitive, don't ignore your epistemological knower. That is very much practical. If you ignore your epistemological knower and if you just behave like a metaphysical knower, then you will land on transcendental illusions. You will speculate like other speculative philosophers. So don't believe in speculation, believe in logic, believe in logical thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir, especially for the first response to the first question, especially linking to the primacy of time. And very nicely, you have pointed out how time could be more fundamental and basic as an a priori form of intuition compared to space. So, which Dr. Anuruma has raised a very beautiful question, and we have tried to show how time we cannot think of something negating time, but we can think of, say, we cannot locate something, we cannot we cannot localize, say, time is so primary. So we can avoid think of a particular localization for space, but we cannot avoid time in that sense. So that's how we have tried to show how schematism, with reference to Kant, has much primacy to time, and very nicely have done so. And for the second question, that too. One thing, but in response to the second question, one thing comes to my mind when you say, you talked even of the transcendental. You talked of the transcendental knower too, okay, while talking of Kant, transcendental knower, not transcendent knower, as you made a distinction. So, well, the subject of knowledge, as you have clearly said, it's the epistemological knower, but you too even talked of the transcendental knower. How to make a distinction between these two, sir? Please. Sir, please unmute, sir. Please unmute, sir.
Yes, transcendental, when we are talking about transcendental, we are using that in the sense of epistemological. So transcendental knower means I made a distinction between the transcendent knower and the non-transcendent knower. That means that the knower which is engaged in the natural process of knowing. Immanuel Kant here is not a psychologist. Here there is a difference between psychology and logic. Here the process is not psychological, because psychological process is very much personal. That means my subjective knowing, why it is transcendental I am saying. If my personal knowing is psychological, it cannot be transcendental. It is transcendental because I am not the absolute knower. That point is very much clear. Even if I am an epistemological knower, but that process of knowing is universal. That is common to all human minds. So whatever is, I have said that transcendental has two meanings. One meaning is something is called transcendental if it is independent of experience. Number one. In that sense, I am a transcendental knower because I have some faculties. I am a human being. I am endowed with such a mind which has certain a priori conditions that regulate the external perception. In that sense, I am a transcendental knower. And transcendental has another meaning, that is which is not personal, which is universal to all human minds. So this mechanism is not personal to me and personal to you and personal to anybody. If it is personal, then it is psychological. He is a psychological patient. He had some psychological problems. Therefore, he or she is thinking this way. No, this is the format of thinking. That whatever Immanuel Kant is speaking about the knowledge mechanism, that is the universal knowledge mechanism. That each and every knower is a transcendental knower in the sense the knowing process itself is not personal, it is universal. In that sense, it is transcendental. But it is not transcendent. Atman, Brahman, Supreme Self. It is not like that.
Sir, I want to say something more. Can I please?
Yes. You are absolutely free to speak.
Sir, I have a problem with considering the epistemological self as the logical self. I mean, if I say that the philosophers who have established the metaphysical self, they also consider themselves as doing, considering a logical self. I mean, if I consider that the epistemological self is a logical self, then there will be philosophers who will be considering the metaphysical self also as rational or logical. So how do I claim that the epistemological self is a logical self? I mean, you can consider Hegel immediately after that, who goes back to metaphysics. Okay, so, and he considers metaphysics, establishment of metaphysics as very much rational, very much logical. So how do I claim this epistemological self as the logical self? Yeah.
Thank you. Second question. Do you have any second question?
No, sir. Can I clarify? Can I make my question clear?
No, I understood.
Okay.
I understood, but perhaps I forgot your question. But I had understood your question. Please repeat.
Actually, she is saying that when you say epistemological self and you talk the epistemological self as the logical self.
Yes, I got, sir, I got. I am speaking what he was speaking, what she was speaking. She is asking a question that many philosophers, those who are speaking about the metaphysical self, they are also speaking about, but you can't claim that. You can't claim that because that is mere assumption, that is beyond logic. Whatever you can claim only the epistemological or logic. I am taking these two terms in one sense, epistemological or logical. Why it is logical? Because it is not psychological. In order to make a difference between psychological and logical, I am using it is logical. When I am talking about epistemological, I am rejecting metaphysics. So any claim you have, that is only about your own reach. You can't claim something beyond your reach. That is your speculation. So that is the starting point of any critical philosophy. Any critical philosophy means philosophy with critique of pure reason means that. That means we have to claim which can be perceived, which can be conceived. Beyond our perception and conception, beyond our own mechanism, whatever we claim, that is transcendental illusion. He is calling that. This is transcendental illusion. Even your illusion is also transcendental because that is also misinterpreted by your mind. So your interpretation and misinterpretation both are through your mind. So you can reach, Honorable Madam, you can reach your logical self only. You can't reach your metaphysical self, according to Immanuel Kant. If we shall go through the epistemological doors, then the doors are only open for this empirical reality. Empirical reality, that is to appearance, even not the thing in itself. The world that you perceive, that is also not the real world. That world is projected through your mind. That means you are perceiving the mentally projected world. But the difference is that this mental projection is not a personal projection. This is a universal projection. This is the general human structure, the structure of a human mind, that it is a question of a human mind. It is not a question of this person or that person. Whatever we know through this mechanism. In that sense, whatever is involved, that is only logical. That cannot be transcendental. It cannot be transcendent. Actually, transcendental means that, but here Immanuel Kant is using the word transcendental in different sense. Did you get my point or not? I want to clarify you really.
Yes, sir. Sir, this is a position of Kant. But when I'm presenting Kant, then I have to consider, him critically also. We can expect that people who are talking of the metaphysical self, they are not talking only of psychology. They are not establishing the metaphysical self only on the basis of psychology. So there is a logic behind their establishment of metaphysical self also. It is not all psychology. So, do you get what I say?
My point is that if you are claiming metaphysics, is it through logic or not? This is a very simple question. What is your psychology? That is something different. Psychologically, you may access to metaphysics. Psychologically, I may be an atheist. Psychologically, some may be a staunch theist. That is the psychological difference. I don't mean that. Therefore, Immanuel Kant is talking about logical, because logic is universal. Logic is not personal. If there is a deduction, that deduction is universally accepted. So, if you are claiming something, whether you are claiming it logically or psychologically or some non-logically, don't use psychological, non-logically. So, metaphysics is not claimed logically according to Immanuel Kant, because if we shall think over then we shall start from experience, number one, and we can't experience without spatio-temporal conditions. When these two conditions are there in the first interview, in the first written test, I failed to assess the metaphysics, because metaphysics is not captured through space and time. So whatever does not come under space and time, any discussion about that is not logical. Whatever name you can give, you may give the name of psychology, you can give the name of theology, you can give a name of story, you may give, but that is definitely not logical. In order to be logical, in order to be epistemological, we have to confirm the conditionings of knowing instruments, that is human mind. That means you are not beyond your mind. You are always through your mind. Okay, thank you. Any interpretation, any philosophy. In the last Sunday, I when I made an observation of the talk of Professor Panir Selvam, sir, I discussed that every philosopher has his own ideology and methodology. That means the philosophy of a philosopher is a format that cannot be beyond that format. So when Buddha is speaking from the format of Buddhism. He can't go beyond that. So when man is thinking in general, man can't think beyond the format of thinking. If you think in the format of Ishvara, then that is illusion. Being a man, you have to think the human format. But mind is so naughty. Mind has free wings to fly everywhere. So mind sometimes roams in the metaphysical world, and there he gets peace. There he gets entertainment. So that part is also necessary. And Immanuel Kant will also discuss about metaphysics, but he is saying that is not pure reason, that is practical reason. So whatever cannot be known, last sentence I am telling you, whatever cannot be known, that can be believed. So you can believe in metaphysics, but you can't have knowledge claim for metaphysics. This is the difference. Belief and knowledge claim. If you claim, then I shall show me God, show me pure consciousness, so you will be in trouble. But if you say, I believe in pure consciousness, you will not put in trouble. So there is a difference between belief and knowledge claim. So far as knowledge claim is concerned, we have to be logical. So far as belief is concerned, many things will come. Our personal beliefs, our emotion, our sentiments, our likes, dislikes, everything will come. Our taste of life, many things will come so far as belief is concerned. But so far as logic is concerned, logic is same for all. Mathematics is same for all. Mind is same for all. Immanuel Kant is speaking, the format of mind is same for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Das. Well, very nice explanation to that point on what Dr. Anurima had asked. Well, when we talk of this epistemological self or the logical self, one thing from the discussion I could get, when we are talking about the categories of understanding, they are logical. They are the logical categories of understanding. We see in that.
Yes, very nice.
We see quantity, quality, the relation, and modality. They're all logical categories. So whatever is subject to that logic, and who is the perceiver of all these judgments? It is the self, and that self is the logical self. You may call that an epistemology to that sense also. But what Anurima is trying to say is, by taking into course other philosophers, other thinkers, can't we bring in the metaphysical self as the logical self? Well, at least to the position of Immanuel Kant, we cannot bring in metaphysics because the categories will not allow any sort of metaphysics to enter the categories, because metaphysics, anything beyond, they are not subject to the categories. They cannot be subject to the categories because there is no sensibility to all that, and where there is no sensibility to that, so they cannot be subjected to the categories of understanding which are logical. So in that sense, to justifying the philosophy of Immanuel Kant, we can reach at an epistemological self which we call logical. But any categorization of speaking of metaphysical self and saying that is logical would be a sort of impossibility for Kant, for instance, because the categories that he is talking of is logical, and what Anurima is trying to say is that the metaphysical self is also brought in by some logic. So that's the point he wants to make. Whenever somebody is
talking regarding Kant, I was not confining myself within Kant to consider the metaphysical self as a logical self.
Yes,
I was going beyond Kant and trying to know whether we can really justify the claim of Kant or not. Okay, I was trying to be critical about the claim which Kant had made. So I was not confining myself within Kant or the Kantian claim. I was trying to judge the Kantian claim. Okay, that was my intention. Sorry.
Okay. So
no. Did you get your point or not? You are free to.
Sir, if I confine myself within Kant, then you are right. But actually, I did not confine myself within Kant, and I was trying to judge the claim which Kant had made.
So okay. Now my question is to you. Any philosopher you give me a name, who can justify that our perception is time free? Anybody else? Forget when we are discussing about Kant, we should think that we are discussing whatever Kant said, that's all right. But we have to bring that to the level of common sense. It is a question of common sense. Kant does not say that space is the common category of condition of all type perception. He knows that space is also limited. Beyond space, there can be perception, but no perception is free from time. This is the common sense philosophy. Now you say, give anybody its name who will go against this statement that yes, beyond time we can have perception. If the answer is no, then we are confined to our logical conditionings. There is a distinction between what is timed and what is beyond time. So man has no access beyond time. This is the common point. But you have a scope to think about beyond time or any metaphysics. That faculty is called bhakti faculty or belief faculty. That is the point. But so far as the epistemology is concerned, you can't have any logical ground, logical claim to say that yes, logically I can know, empirically I can know the metaphysics. That is the point. Knowledge of metaphysics is possible through your belief, not through any logical categories, because logical categories do not permit them. That is the point. Okay, you will think over it and we shall discuss later on.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Das. Thank you very much. And well, the belief and understanding are same. Shravani Mishra, well, she had one question based on the entire the knowledge structure. It refers to Kant when he talks of the sensibility and understanding combining both to yield knowledge. Well, you have tried to answer this during this discussion. Well, she raises another question, whether believing and understanding are same, as if we believe God without understanding is illusion. Sir, well, reference to practical reason, sir. Professor Das.
Okay, he's asking a very common question about the difference between belief and understanding. Here, belief is not logical. Belief is free. Okay, you are free to believe. Why do you believe in Lord Jagannath? That there is no logical answer to it. Then another will say, why don't we believe in Ganesha? Why don't you believe in Allah? This is your personal explanation. So belief has free wings to fly. But when we are speaking about logic, we don't have any personal logic. Here Immanuel Kant is not speaking about a personal deduction. There is no personal mathematics. Mathematics is universal. Logic is universal. Logic is universal means the logic that is understood by me, that will be understood by you, that will be understood by anybody else, irrespective of any land, any caste, creed, religion. That is the general structure of human mind. So this is the difference between understanding and belief. If your understanding is based on your belief, then you are dogmatic. You are not rational. If your understanding is based upon logic, then you are critical, you are practical, you are realistic by nature. Okay, so we have two scopes. One scope for pure reason. In pure reason, we have to be logical. We have to be universal. And you have scope for practical reason. In practical reason, you have access for belief, your free belief. Nobody will challenge your belief, but everybody will challenge your claim. If you say that I believe so and so, nobody will speak against you. Oh, that's your belief. My belief is different from your belief. But if you claim that I logically claim this, then you don't have any personal claim because logical claim is universal. It is same to all. This is the difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Das. Well, we had beautiful questions by Dr. Anurima, Sravani Mr. Madam. Okay. Anyway, it was and the interaction was very good, and Professor Das could answer so beautifully today. I was really thankful to him for his the way he responded, especially with reference to the primacy of time with regard to Kant. So even the questions that Dr. Anurima raised, they are really beautiful questions, and but still Anurima left with a problem as to why the transcendental self will not be treated as a logical self. Well, at least in the structure of, as Professor Das said, in the structure of Immanuel Kant, we cannot have that. Well, that may have a different logic to consider a transcendental self as a logical self, but that requires another metaphysics, not confined to the framework that we have in Immanuel Kant. So thank you, sir, for your very beautiful.
Sir, hello, sir.
Sir.
Today you give vote of thanks.
Okay. Anyway, thank you, sir. Well, it was a beautiful lecture, and I should thank Professor Das for a very good lecture, and I should be more thankful for the responses, especially to the questions of Dr. Anurima and Srinivasan and Sravani Mr. Madam. The responses were really beautiful, and that speaks of Professor Das' involvement in the study of Immanuel Kant, and I should thank him for this. And still more lectures on Kant are there, and we should wait for him to for the coming Saturday for the next lecture on Transcendental Dialectic. Let's see how it goes. Well, I think it could be another great lecture from him. So I should thank him, and I should thank all the question raisers and also all the participants for making this webinar so successful. So with these words, I thank all for making this webinar successful, and also it was indeed a fruitful webinar because I personally say I have learned a lot. Thank you all. Namaskar. With this, the meeting.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you all.